What is up, everybody? That's Emily Grace. I'm Clint Lamb, and we're actually doing something new. Emily Grace and we were going to be doing a show a couple of times a week. We're hitting the off season, or at least after a couple of days, once Alabama plays Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl, we'll be kind of adjusting the schedule a little bit. But one thing that is going to be consistent moving forward is EG and I will be hosting a show together. She's been phenomenal covering kind of boots on the ground in Tuscaloosa pretty much the entire season. This is now your second year doing this, right, EG?
Yes, it's my second season with the next round, and I have to caveat this, guys. I do cover both Alabama and Auburn. I swear I'm very unbiased when it comes to it all, but I am boots on the ground in Tuscaloosa, and I've enjoyed it because we kind of get to give the viewer a different feel of what it would be if we weren't in Tuscaloosa. So I'm at press conferences, I'm at practices, when we were allowed to attend practices. Hopefully that comes back for fall camp or spring practice and basically everything else in between. But I love it. And then, of course, come game day, I'm right there on the sidelines.
Yeah, you doing the Auburn and Alabama thing, I think it gives us an interesting perspective because you'll kind of, having your ear to the ground as far as the other program. I think that's kind of big. I mean, obviously Hugh Freeze, whether it be transfer portal or, on-field stuff, high school recruiting, all that. I mean, I think it is beneficial to have someone who's going to be able to hang as far as the Alabama side of things, but also provide some complimentary information on the in-state rivals. And like I said, this is going to be a couple of days a week. Now, granted, EG, you've been with the next round for 2 years. Have you only exclusively done Alabama and Auburn, or have you covered anybody else? I know you do basketball and everything else, but is there any other schools?
So just Alabama and Auburn. I'm coming up on 2 years in September. So it's been basically, and you guys know the next round, it is nonstop 24/7 and everything keeps you on your toes. And that's what I love about it. But I'll share a story with you guys before we kind of jump into things. So how I came to the next round was a story within itself, and Ryan Brown can tell that story a little better. But I graduated from Georgia Southern. I often am asked, where did you go to school? Moving to Birmingham from Georgia, it was immediately, did you go to Alabama or did you go to Auburn? And then it was not only from Atlanta, I also went to Georgia Southern, which is not an SEC school, and is actually in the group of 5. And I graduated, and all my experience came from sideline reporting for Georgia Southern. And I knew I wanted to be in sports. And when you graduate college, and I'm sure those watching remember this feeling, you feel like you're behind, even though, you're just not. You have all the time in the world, realistically. And 3 months of not having that dream job is not going to kill you. I think it slightly killed me. And then comes along the next round. And Ryan Brown was who my point person was. And I basically said to them, the inner workings of the company, unbeknownst to me, was that they were wanting to hire someone to cover Alabama or Auburn. And then the end goal eventually would be have someone like me at every SEC school. So Georgia, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, you name it. And I wanted that job. And it wasn't even a job that really existed, Clint. It was just kind of in being talked about. And so I called Ryan Brown, and he was in the car with Reed Taylor, the president of the company. I'm sure I can share this story. Now I don't know if I can, but basically Brown called me to politely say, hey, listen, we really like you, but right now, we're not in the place to hire you, basically. We need a couple, more months and one more season under our belt, and then we'll kind of bring you in. And I said, okay, well, I'll work for free. I said, if you can send me to the games, if you can get me there, I'm all in. I know I can provide something. And so I moved to Birmingham on a Tuesday. And by that Saturday, I was at Texas Bama, and I had never set foot in Tuscaloosa until that game. And that was my introduction into this whole thing.
That's a pretty strong start. First of all, I guarantee you, if you were to ask Ryan or Jim or LT or anybody, Reed for sure. I mean, I've talked to Reed about it. You and Taylor does the social media for us, but just absolute grinders. I think, yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say you two are probably the best hires they've ever made. And because y'all work extremely hard. And I think everybody who watches this show with Mick and I, we'd bring you on. The information that you'd bring, you ask everybody, hey, what do you want to know from the coaches? I'll relay, I'll be your voice. And I think that really has resonated with people. And it's been, kind of you saw what happened last year as far as the way Alabama finished. And, they did make it to the college football playoff, but a disappointing loss to Michigan in the first round in the Rose Bowl. And then this year they go 9-3, lose 3 games for the first time in forever, almost a decade and a half. And they miss the college football playoff barely, but they miss it. How has it been for you as far as an outside perception? You watched the Nick Saban, the dynasty, you did all that, but then as you start to come in and cover it, maybe it's not. It's like, hey, they're doing well, but it's not everything everybody said it was, before. I think that's a product of NIL and all that stuff. But how has that been for you from an outsider's perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question because I did grow up in Georgia. And so the obvious question is, well, are you a Georgia fan? And I did grow up a Georgia fan. I have since been cleansed of that, as I joke to say. I am a full-fledged Georgia Southern fan. And so I like to say I have no dog in the fight. But, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that it was very well known, how impressive Nick Saban was. I mean, and I'm 23. And so, for his dynasty, I was, largely in high school. And it was always this awe and reverence. And then I get to cover it. And, I joke with my family that, I get to Alabama and suddenly, Nick Saban's retiring. I only get 1 season with him. But it was crazy, Clinton. We could spend an entire show talking about my experience under Nick Saban for a season and then flipping to Jaylen Mbakwe and then covering his retirement and things like that. But I do think that there's a shift, right? That college football right now, there's arguments being made that we're not going to see those dynasties again, simply because of the transfer portal, NIL. And even, we can simplify it to this, right? When you buy a jersey of a player, there is no guarantee that your kid will be wearing that jersey and that player will be in that same jersey next season. How crazy is that? I mean, Christmas has just happened and kids are getting these college football jerseys and it's awesome. But you have to realize that, next year that jersey could be obsolete. And that is something that was not really a thing, 5-6 years ago at the height of Alabama's, dynasty. And so it has been different. But I will say to Alabama fans, it's different, but there are positives that I have found in Jaylen Mbakwe's staff, especially. A lot of the guys that he has brought in are incredible. Himself, he's incredible. And I think that it's important to continue to highlight that, especially in a season that was lackluster to, most of the Alabama fan base, if not all. I think everyone could say, if you are an Alabama fan, that this is not the season that you expected or wanted in Jaylen Mbakwe's first year at the helm, which is crazy to say considering they just missed a playoff berth.
Yeah, I mean, and you talk about kind of numbers with players' names becoming obsolete. That can happen in season too, right? You got Jaylen Mbakwe, who was wearing number 9. He switches to the offensive side of the football, and then you got Richard Young over there, so got to make him switch his number. And Kobe Prentice has entered the transfer portal. He's moving on to Baylor, and so Jaylen Mbakwe takes over the number 6. So it's just like that can even happen in season at this point. We've seen that in the past. I mean, Reuben Foster changed numbers a couple of times, but it is interesting. It almost is like the safe bet is to remove the name. Like that's what everybody fought for with NIL, is like have the jerseys with specific names on them. But if you're just a fan going to get the number 2 Alabama jersey with no name, typically that's going to be a pretty safe bet, right? You got Ryan Williams, you got, Derrick Henry back in the day. You've had, Jalen Hurts. You've had a bunch of different players wear that number. It is interesting because you do want that customization. That was a huge part of this NIL and allow that player to profit off of, people being able to use his name on the back of a jersey. But I do wonder if we'll kind of shift back to that. I know you wanted to talk about the ReliaQuest Bowl. I know that, we've been with this is a lot of fans. They might view this as meaningless, but I think there's a lot of meaning in this game from a lot of different angles. I'll kind of let you take over. First of all, you can kind of share your thoughts on it and what you've been hearing coming out of Tampa and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that stuck out to me was Coach Womack's press conference. So like you said, they're in Tampa. They've been practicing for the last couple of days. I think they headed down the day after Christmas. So the players got that chance with their families and then they hit the road. And obviously for Alabama, that's not uncommon to be, traveling around this time of year. But Coach Womack was talking about the motivation factor of this game. What does that look like? And he listed off a few things. The 10-win, the 10-win season is really, at the forefront of that, right? Then you have the rematch element of this time last year. I was headed out to Pasadena and Alabama was going to face Michigan in the Rose Bowl. But what he kept talking about, and Clint, this is what I want to talk to you about, is this really sets up the momentum for the offseason. And he said he's been around bowl games. I think he's at like 26 seasons. That's a lot of bowl games to be around. And he said that the one thing that it accomplishes either leaves a really good launch point for you, or you go into the offseason with a bad taste in your mouth. From your perspective, what do you feel like that external and internal motivation is for this Alabama team?
I think it means a lot more to the program than it does the fans. Like if the fans had it their way, hey, Tyler Booker, we absolutely love you, man, but feel free to go ahead and sit out the bowl because this is in our minds, quote unquote, meaningless. And we love to see, the guy who might be starting for us next year when we're trying to make the playoffs, go ahead and get some reps, see where he's at. Experience has always been official. Jaylen Milroe. Hey, let's go ahead and see Ty Simpson. Let's see what that's going to look like. Let's get Austin Mack. Let's split it by halves. That's not the way the team's going to approach it. I've seen certain teams do approach it that way, but that is not the right way to go about it. And I just think it means a lot more to the players to finish what you start. We talk about that all the time. If you want guys to have that mentality when it matters, they need to also learn and condition themselves to have that mentality when it doesn't really matter. And in your mind, it might not matter, but it's stepping between the white lines. It's a football field. You got to go out there trying to play winning football with a winning mentality. I love the fact that, the players are, and what this will do is this will set the precedent for guys moving forward. We saw it with Bryce Young and Will Anderson a couple of years ago. They elected to play, even though they were both projected to go really high, top 5 in the NFL draft. And, I think that had a lot to do with Jaylen Milroe sticking around, Tyler Booker sticking around, Jahad Campbell on the defensive side. I think that when you set that precedent and then guys continue, that is becoming part of the Alabama standard is, hey, we don't say that these things are meaningless. We don't say just because we don't make the playoffs that we're going to kind of coast or do whatever. We're going to try to win this football game and do what we need to do, to finish strong, just like we would in any situation. And I just think that's creating a winning mentality and a winning culture in your locker room and within your program.
Now, Clint, do you think that you are somewhat on an island with that opinion of bowl games and what they mean? And is that an exclusive Alabama mentality?
I do think I'm in the minority. Because like I would even say amongst Alabama fans, and it's like, hey, I would love for fans to share that mentality of, if Jaylen Milroe elected to sit out, everybody be like, hey man, that kind of sucks, because if you're like, oh, that's totally fine, we really want to see Ty Simpson, and I do think there would be benefits if Simpson got reps and played a significant part in this football game, whether it be the entire game, whether you decided to kind of, hey, let's start this quarterback battle now. Let's see Austin Mack. Let's see Ty Simpson. Let's get them all in the mix. It's like, would that be beneficial for next year? Absolutely. So anybody that claims that, I get it. But I also think that just trying to do this whole, like, let's go ahead and turn the page. Let's make this a spring game. Let's make this, not a preseason game, but kind of a tune-up game for next year. See where we're at a lot of these positions. It's like, just because you don't make the playoffs, these guys put in a lot of work. They deserve to have the opportunity to continue to get to continue to have the 10-win seasons. Like you talked about that is a massive deal when it comes to, how many programs in college football history, I don't know. Alabama could be the only one. I could be missing somebody. I've never really went and done the research, but you're looking at what, since 2010, since 2008, really.
Yeah.
You're looking at close to 16, 17 years straight of 10 plus win seasons. That is remarkable. You don't want that to be like an exclusive to Nick Saban. Like we've talked about, Nick Saban didn't really lose to unranked opponents. And here comes Kalen DeBoer in his first year. And Nick Saban, since 2010, he didn't lose 3 games. Kalen DeBoer in his first year loses 3 games. You don't want to continue to stack that. Like, oh man, Alabama had this great run of 10-win seasons. Kalen DeBoer comes in and he doesn't get 10 wins in his first year.
Right.
So I think that you kind of asked about it on more of a grand scale and college football in general. I would say a lot of people, they're all looking towards next year. That's the unfortunate development with the college football playoff. And especially with it being expanded, if you're not in that playoff field, everything else seems meaningless. But I think these are the times where you create the winning habits that Nick Saban and everybody else talks about.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to break the streak, right? For Jaylen DeBoer, he wants to keep that 10 win going. While we're on the subject, Clint, I don't know if you've talked about this yet, but I feel like this is applicable. Cam Ward sitting the second half of his game against Iowa State. What are your thoughts on that? And I know this is a little off topic, but this is still college football important. Give me your thoughts and kind of your take on the second half sit.
Well, me and Chris actually had a big debate about this yesterday. I don't know where he's coming from. He explained it. I didn't get it. He's very pro. Hey, he did admit he wouldn't do it if he was in Cam's situation, but he understood why Cam did it. I agreed that I understand why he did it. It's the culture that we're in. Those type of decisions, that type of behavior, that is encouraged in the current landscape of college football. But I can't. The biggest issue that I have with it, a lot of people say, hey, if he would have set out for the entire game at this point, you would have accepted it more. Really, what's the difference? He gave his team, at least another half more than a lot of other guys. It's like, okay, first of all, I think that was a decision made through, I hate to use this word, but I mean, it's really the only way to put it, selfishness, because of him trying to break that record. It's like, I'm not willing to put myself at risk to play another game with my brothers, but I am willing to put myself at risk with injury to help, get my name in a record book, for an individual stat. I don't like that message. I have a problem when if you're away from the game and you're not in the midst of battle and your competitive juices are flowing and you decide when, you're away from it, hey, I do think it's the smarter decision to step away from it. I don't want to risk injury. I'm projected to go in the top 10. I more so understand that. What I have a problem with is a guy who's in the heat of battle and you're going back and forth with a team. And most people, you want competitive spirits, guys who want to go out there and compete. When they have the ability in the moment, at the drop of a hat, to turn that off and say, you know what, I've done what I came here to do. I broke a record. And so I'm now going to step away and not finish out this game. That it's not in this individual situation, it might not be that big of a deal. But I think when you're talking about that player and his mindset, being able to turn off the competitiveness like that, I don't like that is encouraged. I never could have seen myself doing that when I played. I understand it's a completely different game, but I know I do not agree with the decision. And the fact that kind of a lot of people are defending him, it's like, all you're doing is encouraging more of this. And we saw this on the NFL level with Anthony Richardson in the middle of a game. He's a quarterback and he elected to take himself out of the game. And it's like, you're going to start seeing more and more of that type of stuff because this type of behavior is encouraged.
Right. And I think that you hit the nail on the head is the behavior that's being encouraged in the environment these players are in. I find it hard to cast stones on these players at times because it's not exactly the most ideal situation for them as a person, player, or athlete, right? It's in a way, they're in an impossible situation when it comes to the transfer portal, what they're going to do next with the bowl games, etc. But I do think I like how you put it with if you can turn that competitive spirit off in the middle of a game and be okay with it, I will be interested to see how he explains that going forward, because in my opinion, that's going to be something that's asked of him is, hey, what was your mindset in that decision? What led to that decision? Was it made in the moment? Was this something that you talked about with your coaching staff and your team beforehand? Or what led you to that decision? Because if I'm an NFL team, what does that say about the player that I'm bringing on to potentially lead my team?
100%. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. He will get asked about this. Will it affect his draft stock? I made the comparison yesterday to Jamar Chase back in 2020. Everybody said his draft stock is going to take a hit for him sitting out because NFL teams aren't going to like the fact that he wasn't willing to go out there and compete. And it didn't. He went number 5 overall. He was the number 1 receiver taken. And so, I mean, it didn't take a hit at all. Do I think it's going to affect Cam Moore's draft status at the end of the day, especially in a weak quarterback class? Absolutely not. He's going to be the number 1 overall pick or the number 2 overall pick. I don't see any scenario in case unless he just has a catastrophic draft cycle or draft circuit. I don't see him any situation where he falls out of the top 3 and probably the top 2. But I do think that, if you're there are questions like with Shadir Sanders and just, kind of
Mm-hmm.
how he's, and, in some ways, I love Deion Sanders in some ways, but I also don't like how he handles certain things. I don't like the kind of babying certain players and doing all that. When you go to an NFL team and you've that's been your career and now you're not getting treated that way, I have questions about that too. He might handle it fine, make that adjustment fine, doesn't bother him. He becomes another one of the guys. Or he could, not like it. It can cause drama, controversy, him saying stuff to the media. You never know. And so when you're going through this process as an NFL evaluator or an NFL decision maker, you've got to weigh some of these things. I just think that, with Cam Ward, the talent is undeniable. The guy is really, really good. And this quarterback class is very, very questionable. And so through that, I wouldn't be shocked at all if he still ended up being a top 3 pick.
Okay, I want to stay on this vein, except we're going to switch to Alabama since this is an Alabama show. Jaylen Milroe, as of the last 2 days, he is still undecided on declaring for the NFL draft. He mentioned it when he was asked about it in the media scrum in Tampa by some reporters, and he said, what we've heard for the last few weeks, he's focused on this games. He's focused on finishing this out with his brothers. What are your immediate quick thoughts for those watching about what your take is on where Jaylen Milroe is headed next? And what do you expect from the quarterback position in the ReliaQuest Bowl? Will we see Ty Simpson? Will we see Austin Mack? And I do have a quick tidbit about Austin Mack. So right before Tampa, when we had media availability with Coach DeBoer and the coordinators, Coach DeBoer was actually asked about Austin Mack. And for those that don't remember, Austin Mack came with DeBoer, right? So they have a relationship already existing. He comes with them and he kind of mirrors the Michael Penix style of play that DeBoer was more used to when he was at Washington. And he kind of paused when he was asked about Austin Mack. And I can't remember the exact question, but he definitely kind of took the floor, if you will, kind of retook the attention of the scrum and said, he is the hardest working player and had incredible things to say. Now, I'm curious how that translates. Will we see more of them? But your immediate quick thoughts on what to expect from that quarterback position, and then Jaylen Milroe declaring for the NFL draft. Will we see that? Will he be back next year?
I thought it was an interesting pivot, even though it might not have been earlier. A few weeks ago, he was asked about the quarterback position, and he talked about those guys and the opportunity they're going to have in a looming quarterback battle. And he just that kind of, it's like, okay, he was talking like, okay, he's leaving. Now, granted, that could end up following in line with this. I mean, do you have something you want to add to that?
Well, I do want to add to that because I noticed that same thing. I was actually there when Jaylen was asked about this. So this was about a week before they left for the ReliaQuest Bowl. And I point blank asked Jaylen, I said, are you playing in the bowl game? And he said, yes, I am playing. I'm finishing this out. When he started talking about the quarterback room and that position, what he was saying was he was talking like he wasn't going to be a part of that group next season. And instead of using the word we, he was using the word they. Again, I don't know if that was him, prematurely saying something or not saying something, but that was kind of what I wanted to add. When I was, with him in person, it seemed very, distant, as in, they have a great group, etc.
Yeah, and that's kind of, so if he's still, is he kind of backtracking or pivoting here in the way that he's approaching this, or is it kind of a situation where he knows he's one way or another, he's not going to be back at Alabama, whether that be transferring somewhere else or whether that be, moving on to the NFL draft. I don't, it does kind of feel that way to me just based off of previous comments. Now, did he say that and he was like leaning draft? Maybe he's got some draft feedback and now he's second guessing it. Maybe it's not what he wanted to hear. I have no idea. Anything on that front would be purely speculation. But all I know is what the guy said, and he did not say, "Hey, I'm leaving." So I don't want to. We're reading between the lines on a lot of this stuff, but I will say it's pointing in a certain direction. I think we can acknowledge that at least. But that's an excellent question as to whether he's going to be moving on to the NFL draft. Is he going to be back at Alabama? Is he going to be playing somewhere else? I would say all three are possible, even though based off of my understanding, and I could be wrong, I think the least likely is him returning to Alabama. I'll put it that way. Now, granted, you also asked about Ty Simpson. Is it possible we see him? In my opinion, and if I do see him and it's not through a Jaylen Milroe injury, I will disagree with the decision. Like I said, I think that you need to approach this. If you're playing certain guys, that if this was LSU back in November, or this was Auburn in the Iron Bowl, or this was Georgia back in Week 5, and Ty Simpson wasn't going to be getting some reps, then I don't think you should be getting reps in this bowl game. I just don't. I think that Nick Saban had mastered the ability to treat every opponent the same, treat every situation the same. You're trying to create a winning mindset. You're not just trying to win football games. It's not about the results on the scoreboard. If you're creating the right mentality, you're executing on a more micro level where it's, hey, I'm trying to win this rep. I'm trying to win, the internal battles in my head, facing adversity, doing all that. And then when you look at the scoreboard at the end of the game, if everybody's done that well enough, you win the game. And sometimes it's by a lot. I just don't think that you worrying about, hey, we would love to get Ty Simpson some reps to go ahead and get a kickstart for next year, because then you're kind of telling everybody, if Ty goes in and he throws an interception, we got him the reps, wasn't great reps. Now we end up losing this game. Now that we don't get to 10 wins, this game was different. We were able to treat this game differently. And I've never agreed with that approach. You want the Nick Saban consistency. And I've used this example many times. Tua Tagovailoa in 2018. He had been banged up. Everybody was wanting Nick Saban to hold Tua out. They were playing the Citadel because they had LSU the following week. And Nick Saban ended up playing them against Citadel. It was a really rough first half for Alabama, but everybody was mad. Like, what if he gets hurt again? What if he can't play against LSU? Like, you're taking an unnecessary risk. Nick Saban's mentality is if this was LSU, Tua would be playing. If this was Auburn, Tua would be playing. Just because you guys want to treat everybody differently, I don't do that. So if we're going to play him, if we would have played him if this was LSU this week, we're going to play him against the Citadel because I treat every opponent the exact same. Does it have added risk? Absolutely. But what you get in the grand scheme of things, you might lose a star quarterback ahead of a huge game, and everybody hates you for it. But what you've gotten in the long haul is a mentality from your players and the entire program. We treat everybody the same, and you don't get the 6-6 losses against Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. So, are you willing to trade that risk and potential loss for making sure that you never lost to unranked opponents? I think a lot of Alabama fans would in the grand scheme of things, but I just think you need to treat everybody the same.
One more thing on Jalen Milroe's presser that he did with the media. He talked a lot about Jaylen Mbakwe. And Clint, for fans that don't know really what to expect with this whole Jaylen Mbakwe situation, right? He was here, he was there. There was a lot of media surrounding it. Alabama was super quick on the videos too, social media wise, of coming out with some things to let everyone know that he was back with Ryan Williams, etc. Why should fans be excited about Jaylen Mbakwe being on the offensive side of the ball if they don't really know his backstory?
He's an electric athlete. I mean, the guy and a lot of great decision makers around college football, head coaches, they were looking at Jaylen Mbakwe and they were seeing an offensive star. And Nick Saban saw him in a camp at Alabama, worked him out at defensive back. Nick Saban was a DB guy, and so that's the preference. I mean, I'll go ahead and tell you, my head coach in high school was a defensive-minded head coach. And I'll go ahead and tell you, a majority of your star players were on the defensive side because he wanted to make sure his side of the football was taken care of. And Nick Saban kind of, when he sees a star athlete that could end up on offense or defense, unless you got a massive need on the offensive side, he's looking at him and saying, man, I can turn you into a star defensive back. And so he made that pitch. Jaylen Mbakwe, I mean, how do you tell Nick Saban, no, I don't want to play defensive back? You're the greatest to ever do this. You know what you're looking for in the position, and you think I could do it at a high level. So he was willing to play defensive back. But now Nick Saban's not there. He's not getting that coaching. And so I think part of him wanted to play offense. I think the most important thing, a lot of people are going to view this as a money grab. I disagree with it. I've been vocal about that. To me, this was more about Jaylen Mbakwe being a little uncertain on his role next year. If you're courting guys in the transfer portal, you've got Deshaun Jones, probably coming back. You've got Xavier Brown, another true freshman, 5-star player who started over Jaylen Mbakwe this year. He's going to be returning as possible. Damani Jackson could be back. It's like, where does he fit into the mix? Is he sitting on the bench next year? And he's like, if I'm sitting on the bench and kind of developing, I would really rather do that on the offensive side of football. That's where I want to be. Now there's, it's possible he could end up playing both ways. I think with Travis Hunter, we saw that is possible. But, I think that Alabama fans need to understand that I don't think there's anything wrong with Jaylen Mbakwe. I think he was approached through back channels. He was given a lot to think about, life-changing money. He ultimately chose to come back to Alabama. I don't think it was even close to being any sort of match from an NIL perspective. A lot of fans think, oh, you wanted 7 figures. You used Ole Miss as leverage against Alabama. You made Alabama pay up. I don't think that is even remotely what happened. In fact, I'm 99.9% sure that's not what happened. And so I think he's kind of been treated unfairly. I understand the frustrations from fans, but your gripe is more with the current landscape and not with Jaylen Mbakwe individually. And I just think from a wide receiver perspective, I think he can play in the slot, be a dynamic player. The fact that, Jalen Milroe kind of mentioned, him being a part of the game plan, I think that's kind of big. You're shorthanded at receiver, so part of that might be through necessity, but it's also going to give him an opportunity to kind of showcase himself and, see what they can do as far as next year. So I really am excited about the possibility. I would prefer that he played offense exclusively, but it is also possible that he continues. At least I wouldn't be shocked if during this process he was exclusively on the offensive side. And then in the spring, if he wanted to go both ways, maybe he started that in the spring, but he's kind of behind so much. They need, some replenished depth in the receiver. I could see him ended up getting, quite a few, or at least, pretty much exclusively playing wide receiver during the bowl game.
Well, and we talk about, are these bowl games meaningless? For Jaylen Mbakwe, this bowl game is not at all. And this is honestly best case scenario for him because you mentioned how behind he is offensively. Now, we have to mention how incredible he was as an offensive athlete, as a wide receiver in high school. However, you're at the college level, you're playing at Alabama, there's going to be a learning curve there. And for him to get the opportunity to, potentially play mostly on that offensive side, it's huge. Jaylen also mentioned that he tracks the ball incredibly well. And I think that is a trait that kind of goes both ways for sure, especially in the positions that he was playing. But still, to have such high praise coming out of the gate pretty immediately, I think that's something that Alabama fans should be excited about too, considering how thin that wide receiver room was getting. I think, what was it? Alabama was down to 4 scholarship players at that position. And we hadn't even talked about Michigan, and we can get into that later on, on another show. But on both teams, you're seeing specific rooms be a little more thin than expected this time of the year.
I mean, yeah, you're seeing it at corners or really defensive back as well. Losing Malachi Moore, losing Keon Sabb. You talk about, the cornerback room and the fact that Jaylen Mbakwe, we don't know which side of the football he's going to be playing. Zay Mincy made the switch off of corner. Like we even heard at one point that Red Morgan was getting some reps as a perimeter corner. And I thought that was kind of noteworthy. I don't think he's a perimeter corner long-term at all. We've heard in the past Malachi Moore getting some reps as kind of an outside corner. And that, to me, that was just kind of showing off some positional flexibility, but also the fact that, that was last year when, Tyrion Arnold was banged up and Kool-Aid McKinstry was banged up and all these different guys were banged up. And it's like, okay, we need to make sure if we start having to work even more into our depth in the middle of a game, we can't be putting somebody out there that's seen 0 reps. So I think that was more out of necessity. With Red Morgan, I think it's the same thing. Devontae Smith, he decided to move on. He's now at Notre Dame. That Husky position, you could end up seeing several different players there. I think Deshaun Jones is probably going to start there. Zay Mincy, I guess he's probably going to play safety alongside Bray Hubbard, or at least get some action there. I don't know. King Max played some Husky, but he's undersized. We saw that in the Tennessee game. That size can really hinder him when you're playing him as kind of a slot corner. Red is certainly going to be in this mix, whether it be at Husky, whether it be at safety, whether it be at corner, at least for this game. But yeah, that is a position that's thin right now. And so the fact I will say, when you're talking about 2 thin positions, really the secondary as a whole and at receiver, if Jaylen Mbakwe is pretty much exclusively playing receiver, despite the fact that they're kind of light at both, that could end up being pretty telling. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, but it's going to be fascinating to watch. There's a lot of storylines here. The most important thing is playing good football, keeping everybody healthy, and trying to get to 10 wins. But I also think when you start looking at other types of storylines surrounding the game, there's a lot of interesting ones to monitor.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, we have to talk about the kind of fun side of these bowl games that we get a taste to look at, if you will, get a little look-see. So some of the team went to Busch Gardens. Clint, I have to ask you, are you a roller coaster guy? Because Jalen Milroe was very adamant that he was going to watch from a distance. And I actually heard that Alabama only sent 5 players to Busch Gardens, and that was it, and did not send anyone to the beach day.
Well, first of all, that's interesting. I was not a roller coaster kid. I hated them. I was terrified of them. I was terrified of everything, man. Chucky, the doll, still kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies today. It's crazy because I've grown out of 98% of those fears. Spiders and Oompa Loompas, never got past those. Don't know why, but I don't trust Oompa Loompas. But as far as roller coasters, that was a big one. Like when I'd go to Six Flags with friends. I was even in like middle school, and nobody convinced me to go on a roller coaster. I'd stand with the dads while friends went and got on the roller coasters. But as I've gotten older, I've only been to Six Flags as an adult probably twice, maybe. But I mean, it was like a switch turned, and I'm all about the roller coasters now. Let's get dangerous. Let's have fun. But from Jalen Milroe's perspective, as a kid who was terrified of him, I understand where he's coming from because, I've heard the horror stories surrounding some roller coasters, and you're not going to see me getting on rides at like a what do you call it? A carnival? Like
a state fair.
State fair. Yeah, no, I'm not getting on a ride that was built 6 hours ago. But as far as like Six Flags or Busch Gardens and all those roller coasters, yeah, let's have fun. I prefer though, and I might be in the minority, I've always been a huge fan of the wooden roller coasters. I don't know, the Great American Screamer at Six Flags.
Yeah.
I don't mind the loops at all. That's fun as well. But I don't know. I like the rockiness, and it's just it's a little bit of a nostalgia there too.
Yeah, so I'm from Atlanta, so Six Flags is right in my neck of the woods. I probably haven't been in like probably 10 years, maybe 15 years. But there's a nostalgia for me. I don't mind them, but what's funny now is that like I like roller coasters. If I get on a roller coaster now, I feel like I'm going to pass out when I get off. Like I am so nauseous. I'm dizzy. I'm like, okay, nope, can't do it. But I think I'm in the camp of Jalen that if I were to play a bowl game, I don't know if I would be heading towards the roller coasters.
Stay away from, I don't know what it's called now. It's probably called something different, but the Ninja at Six Flags, that thing was rough, man. Yeah, that one was, there was some horror stories about that. It didn't stop me from riding it, but it was rocky enough where I didn't feel great getting off of it. And my neck didn't feel great getting off that thing. So could you imagine, Jalen Milroe planning to play in a bowl game and all of a sudden out with neck injury due to roller coaster? I get it. He's the quarterback. He's got to keep himself protected. We'll give him a pass on that.
Yeah, imagine explaining that to Jeff Allen, the head athletic trainer. Hey, Jeff, sorry, I went on the roller coaster.
This was not a 300-pound defensive lineman that did this. This was the Ninja, or this was the X roller coaster. I'm sorry, this was very avoidable, and I just chose not to avoid it. Yeah, that would be a great conversation to have.
All right, guys, that is going to do it for us. Clinton, thank you so much for letting me kind of be a part of this in more of a regular role. I'm excited of what is to come. And guys, we were talking about before the show what we want this to be, and we both agreed that we want this to be both of our personalities coming together under Alabama football. And I hope that is translated through the screen. And I will say, this is not going to be my normal setup. I wish it was. I'm at the beach for the new year. I'm off because Alabama is not in the playoffs. So you will not see me with the nice ocean in the background. But nonetheless, I'm excited to be a part of this and of Cover Crimson.
Yeah, I've been staring at, I guess it's over your right shoulder to us, but I guess it would be your left shoulder. But just a clear line to crystal blue water. And I'm a little bit, I wouldn't say jealous. You know what? I will say jealous because it would be nice to just hear some waves. I'm a big guy as far as like sitting on the balcony. And maybe I'm old. I don't know. I love sitting on the balcony at night and just hearing the waves crash. There was a place I used to stay down in Gulf Shores that had like a hot tub on the balcony, and just sitting on the hot tub with a nice cold beer in your hand, hearing the ocean waves. If I could have stayed out there for the entire week, I would have. But I hope you have fun. I hope,
Thank
you know, I
you.
know the weather here got kind of bad the last couple of days. I hope it didn't get too bad there. But so you'll be spending New Year's down there.
Yeah, so this is a tradition that we've actually done since I was, golly, a baby. We go with the same few families, couples and their kids, and we head down to 30A every year. And we started, I don't know if, you know, you guys have been down here, but now it's so crowded. I mean, this is like a great time of year to come. I should like share the secret. But when we first started coming down here, it was empty. I mean, there was no one. And so it's always been a fun tradition that we do. And obviously with, you know, the business that we're in and New Year's off is very rare. So I said, you know what, I'm going to take it this year because I don't know the next one that I'll get. But it's been great. We're on 30A. We're right near Seaside. And it's my favorite place in the world. So sorry to make you guys jealous of the ocean in the background, but you know, I'll be in my apartment here soon enough and we'll be back to regular scheduled programming.
I've always said that I wanted to watch a day of college football down at the beach. I just feel like that would be a great combination. Walk inside the condo, you know, watch some great games, walk out on the beach. You know, that just I think you've got the right stuff here, right combination. Thank you so much for hopping on here with me. Like I said, we're going to be doing this a couple of times a week. You know, still getting days confirmed, but that's going to, by the time next week rolls around, it's going to be completely set. It will officially be the off season, but it really won't be the off season around here. Plenty of content coming. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also get over to covercrimson.com, become a part of the message board community that we've got going on over there. It's growing every day. A lot of great information. And also get over to mybookie.ag. Get yourself the playoff games are coming up. You got Alabama playing Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl. That's coming up. A lot of games to bet on. Certainly need to go do that. And once again, EG, appreciate you hopping on here with me, and we will do this again soon.